Greetings.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Joe and Doug Show. We're excited that you're with us. Yes, I did, Joe. I got my hair chopped. I got a little cool line put in right over in here in this region, and I got this all shaped up.
I was going to say you look different in some way.
It feels good. It feels
Yeah?
good.
Yeah.
I had let it go a little longer than normal, and there's a newer guy that's been coming to the church. I actually told him that we should have him on the show. He owns Polished Gentleman's Barbershop in Camel, and entrepreneur looking to possibly do a second location at some point. Just had a baby.
Nice.
Started coming to church maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, and hit me up for a haircut, and here we are looking
Dapper.
stylish. Yeah, feel
Looking
good.
good.
So how are you?
Good.
Good. It's
All right.
beautiful this week weather-wise. It's
Yeah.
like high of 70.
I didn't get to freaking enjoy
72.
it, but
I haven't yet. I have not been outside. My kids are like, "Can we have a football pass?" I'm like, I literally stopped home, wolfed down a sandwich, and then came here and took a Zoom call on the way here. Which, by the way, when you get into these buildings, sometimes it cuts out your Zoom call. I dropped it once or twice while I was going. I'm going, I missed that last
it's a
part.
well-built building.
Yeah.
But I'm fasting, and they cooked.
Oh.
Chef Don did a steak here.
Yeah,
earlier today,
I can
so,
smell. It smells amazing. Literally, they opened the doors, and I'm like, "What is going on in there? And why wasn't I invited?" No, that's so cool. And there's lots of neat stuff. I think just in general, this time of year is fun. I know, school's back in, football's in high gear, all the events and stuff, and everybody's kind of pushing past the COVID kind of stuff, and it's quote unquote normal.
Yes.
Feeling feels great. You looking forward to Halloween? I know that's like kind of your guys'
It's a
deal.
good
You
thing.
love getting dressed up. And
Yep.
What are you guys going to be this year? Do you have your?
We dress one of the campgrounds we go to in Cook Forest. They have, before they shut down their season, they have a Halloween. So we already did our dress up. We were Jack and Sally.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you don't do it on the 31st?
I don't. I mean, she probably will.
Okay.
But yeah.
And are you guys doing anything special for trick or treating, or does Ryan go trick or treating? Or you guys?
Yeah. Oh yeah. They do the neighborhood trick or treating thing.
We've been once.
When I was a kid, it felt like it was a much bigger event. Like I felt like it was like days of preparation and hours of trick or treating.
Did you use your pillowcase?
Yes.
Yeah, you had to use a pillowcase. It was the only way to do it.
It's huge.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. You wanted to fill it.
Yeah.
So my kids have these like little buckets, and like you get 5 pieces of candy in them. You got to dump them out. I'm like, it's stupid. I said, we paid for the bucket that doesn't hold any candy. You got a pillowcase. Use your pillowcase.
That's it.
So now this is going to be the first year we're all coordinating costumes. My wife is not a big Halloween fan. I was not necessarily a big Halloween fan, but our kids are big candy fans. So we talked about it, and they're super into Marvel right now. So we're all being Marvel characters. That's going to be fun.
You said you're Thor.
I'm Fat Thor from Endgame,
Thor?
so that I get to wear my robe and pajama pants and Crocs. It's going to be awesome. So, I guess kind of where the topic we want to go to is we want to help people take the next step. We've been doing a lot of the vision boarding. We've talked about resonance. We've talked about who's in your life, networking. We've hit a lot of these topics, and we hit them from different angles in a lot of different ways. I think the thing I want to talk about today is what do you do in a crisis? I was in a leadership roundtable this morning, and the gentleman who was sharing pastors a fairly large church and has been doing it for a long, long time, and has helped several churches through crises. And he did this talk, and it was like not recorded. He shared some like real raw stuff that he walked some pretty dramatic stuff, walked people through. But then he talked about those principles that help us navigate a crisis. How do we help others navigate an organization, a person, whatever? So how does Joe navigate a crisis?
See, I know where I make sure that I don't ramp myself up to a point where I can't personally manage it. And then I outsource that shit as fast as I can to someone who's got specialty in what I need. And knowing your limit of, because I mean, when it comes to depression and anger, I mean, those things sometimes go beyond what you can control.
Yeah. One of the facts / statistics that he shared that really stuck out to me was there's a gentleman who got together somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 to 1,000 admirals, generals, colonels, these high ups in the military, some retired, some active, and basically asked them for their top books that they would recommend. I don't know, it's top 3 or top 5. And then they took all the lists, cross-pollinated. Obviously, there were duplicates and stuff like that. and they looked through all these books and they looked for a leadership theme in the books. And one of the principles, there were several, but one of the principles that these military leaders all kind of seem to gravitate towards was that leadership in a crisis, the leader should do two things. They should always be the calmest person in the room. So when everybody else is freaking out, they're not, and they're always positive. And they said that those are the two things that every person's looking for in a crisis. And he shared a couple of stories that when, you go through a crisis, you always have somebody that has a really loud, simple solution, and it's usually not correct.
Okay.
And
I misunderstood your question. I thought you meant an internal crisis. I didn't realize we were talking about an external,
internal.
But okay. All right. Well, I might have a better answer, a different answer for external.
Go ahead. Give me an external.
Well,
crisis.
Going along with that is being the person that, sort of like insulates the people from the crisis, being that kind of gatekeeper between it. That was probably a better response.
No, yeah. And I could tell you were answering internal. That's why I led into that next thing. But it's true. Like a lot of times we have personal crisis and we have to handle those one way. But externally, when we're leading others, when we're leading our families, when we're leading our organizations, like people are looking for a steady hand at the helm. If the crisis goes and then the leader goes, that's no good. The crisis can go, but you just need to, we're going to get through this. It's okay. I understand everybody's feeling this way. And he said something interesting. He said, when you stay calm and you stay positive, a lot of your people that are following you will claim they'll be frustrated with you because, sometimes in a crisis, people have a quick, simple solution and they're loud about it. And they'll say, oh, well, he's just out of touch. If he really felt what we felt, he'd be going crazy too.
Right.
And so he's like, you can get insults lobbed at you. And I just thought it was a really great point. And he goes, stay calm anyway, because people are gravitating towards calm and positive in a crisis. And I just thought that was really, really kind of poignant for us. Because crisis happen.
Yeah.
The car accident happens, the diagnosis happens, the person walks in and resigns. That happens. The sales weren't where they were supposed to be. The order gets lost, whatever. Like crises happen on big and small scales, and how you approach them and how you handle them says a lot about you as a leader. When you go through a crisis, one of the other things that he said was, it's in that moment where your values and your preparation is revealed. A lot of the last 18 months of COVID has just revealed what's there.
Right.
A lot of people are like, oh man, I can't believe people are so selfish. We just revealed what was there.
Yeah.
Or I can't believe people would do this. No, that was always there, but the crisis just revealed it, just brought it to the surface. Do you watch yourself? Do you evaluate yourself when you go through a crisis and go, okay, how did I handle that? How did I navigate that? And do you evaluate others, employees and stuff like that? Because I'm sure you've had times where big accounts have walked out the door and you're like, I just want to fire everybody, but obviously you don't. And so how do you navigate those type of crises?
Yeah. So for personally, I visit myself, like I picture myself in the last crises. And like when I'm in the moment, I thought it was the worst crisis on the planet and I would never escape it. And it was going to be the worst. But when I go visit that, like, no, I kind of survived that one. So I kind of set myself up knowing that don't let those chemicals get the better of me and make me escalate beyond what it is. Cause I'll weather this one too. And even though it feels bad, it was not as bad as it really seems in the moment. So when I calm myself, I can ready myself then to deal with, all right, well, these are just problems to solve. So we're either going to get erratic and solve nothing, calm ourselves down and go make something better.
How important is adrenaline during a crisis? Because it's one of those, the body's natural response is to release that when you have the fight or flight kind of thing. And, it heightens certain things. And so, it's important to navigate and allow your body to utilize the natural processes so you can do that. So how important is that? And how do you allow that?
Let me give you a story.
Yeah.
So I'm doing a full self-driving beta thing, right? So I have this piece of software that is monitoring my driving habits to make sure that I'm a safe driver, right? And it's saying like it's monitoring my speed and my braking and, whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, this morning I got into a road rage incident, right? And typically I would do certain things during a road rage incident, but when I'm in nitroglycerin mode, right, where I'm nitroglycerin mode is basically I'm shuttling around something that's highly explosive and I have to drive around so that I don't let it explode. but I had two things here. I had this guy that was really pissing me off, and me couldn't do anything about it because my car's watching me behave, right? And I got dinged, right? Because I did do a little bit of stupid stuff, but I felt it. Like, I knew I had to stay calm. My son was in the car, and dude was like pulled up on my side, like giving me the stare down. And I'm like,
Telling you were number one.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. and so like, I like get to me a little bit. So so he boxed me in so that I couldn't get by another car and made me slow down. And my first ding was that I got too close to the car in front of me because the dude went by this car and slowed down like 50 miles an hour. And I was just like, oh, you razzle frazzle. But then a third lane opened up. So I like got around and went over there. And when he pulled up there, I was like, 3 lanes, can't do anything about it. Right. And I was probably erratically driving this way. So I lost like 3 safety points in one moment because I gave into road rage.
So what's the point of the beta testing? Like, what's it going to do for you?
So there's a new feature that they unlock in the software where it's sort of like in the steps to be autonomous, where right now it'll drive itself on freeways. This software it'll drive itself in cities and everywhere around. It'll take turns and do everything for you. So
that's super cool. You have to stay calm, Joe.
I know. I couldn't. I tried. Like, Ryan, is this the first time you've seen road rage for me? And he was like, no, I've seen road rage from you before.
It's so funny. One of the things that I don't want to say accused of, but one of the things that people will see, I've had plenty of meetings. I've had plenty of times where people have not liked decisions I've made. And they're like, I don't know how you sit in that meeting and they erupt and you don't erupt back. And I'm like, it's practice. And I understand that by staying in this space, staying calm, staying balanced, I don't need to let my adrenaline go up just because theirs is. It shifts the atmosphere in the room, and it makes me look sane and them look crazy. And 9 times out of 10, they apologize at the end, and they're like, or a day later or a week later, I shouldn't have been that crazy. Sorry, I didn't mean to yell at you or whatever. I'm like, oh, that's fine. And in the back of my head, I'm like, if we just learn to control some of these things. And one of the things that I'm finding out is most people are living in a cortisol addiction.
Yeah, for sure.
They run to the hill. Everything is built on adrenaline. They run from crisis to crisis, fire to fire. And so at the end of their week, they're like TGIF. Like, they're not happy to be at work because they're going putting out. And then they get to Friday and it's just like, oh, finally I can quote unquote relax. Right. How do you break that addiction? Because we're all kind of like, even people who don't need a crisis will create drama because they need the adrenaline and the cortisol to run.
Yeah, and it's just as addictive as anything else. We talked last show about planting seeds for whatever, and people are addicted to cortisol, plant seeds so they can get their cortisol. It's 100% environmental. Like, we literally set up our entire lives around being able to claim that victimhood over and over again. So when you have the chance, I mean, I call it the crazy bus, right? You want to get on the crazy bus, so you set yourself up so you get a ride, right? And in all different capacities. With relationships, you set up relationships where you'd be a bad relationship to have if you were addicted to cortisol, because you won't give in to my fact that I would tell you something crazy and then you would basically diffuse everything and not let me live in the cortisol moment.
Well, and part of that was the household that I lived in, is my dad would go skyrocket and then come down, skyrocket and then come down. And I was just like, I'm just not buying
You'll skip that part.
Yeah, I'm not buying that ticket to your show. So, I mean, you can yell at me. That's fine. Believe me, I've been called worse. And, and, but coming to that space. But what it does is it gives people, even around me, that are, on team or whatever, they'll look at situations where they'd be like, wow, I would have totally freaked out. And it puts them in a spot like, maybe I should do that differently. And I love being able to lead by example, particularly in that department, because it wasn't something that was modeled for me. It was one of those things that I had to go and learn, and I had to get around others that did it really well. And containing and keeping yourself poised, even when others aren't, is really challenging. Yeah, because some crisis you can't control,
right?
But you can control yourself.
Yeah, one of my early mentors, and then later on, Dave Ramsey, talked about having relationships that you might be a sane one, but your better half or your other half is a crazy one. And insulating our business and our operations, making sure that they don't have crazy come. Because I've watched totally sane, grounded people right? When it comes down to it, and crazy at home will totally make crazy happen on someone who's not even part of, doesn't even buy in it. They don't want to ride the crazy bus, but they ride the crazy bus when it's necessary, when crisis happens.
Yeah. And it's interesting because people like that want to pull people into their party.
For sure.
And so if you give in, right? People all the time, well, I don't know why people always call me with their problems. Well, let me tell you, you're inviting it.
Yeah.
And you bought a ticket to the show.
Yes.
And so you like it enough in some way, you're giving them what they want. And so they're continuing to call you. One of the reasons people don't call me with some of that stuff is they're like, well, I know what he's going to say. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. Pastor, I was going to call you, but I knew what you were going to say. And I was like, okay, was I correct? Well, and here's the thing. When people go into crisis, whether it's marital, whether they lose a job, whether, something comes to the world, a death in the family, a lot of times people, when they hit that crisis button, they don't go looking for the help that they need. They just go looking for agreement. They want to feel better. They don't want to be better. And that is such a challenge to help people through that, because ultimately we want to be better. But right now, all you want to do is feel better. And I can help you feel better. I can tell you nice things about yourself. I can pat you on the back. I can raise your your happy, and joy and all that sort of stuff. We can release some serotonin, and we can do all that. But at the end of the day, do we just want to have a little buzz and then come back down and realize, hey, my world's still the same? Or do we actually want to be better? And that becomes a different conversation. But most people, when the crisis comes, they're looking for the person to come around, like, you know what, you're right. He is a jerk. And, you think about that, the girlfriends that all go out dancing and stand around a circle, with their pocketbooks and shoes in the middle. And they're just like, yeah, all guys are jerks, and they get in that kind of pity party. Or you even see it with employees, right? They all go to lunch at the same time, like, oh, our boss, da, 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 da. And they're, what are they doing? Misery loves company.
Yeah, right.
And just because there's a crisis, or just because something is demanded of you, ultimately, you have to make the choice. Do I just want to feel better? Because I can go complain and feel a little bit better for a moment, or do I want to be better? And that be better is so much better.
Yeah. I guess the gateway drug to that crisis is the drama. Like if you can deprive yourself of being interested in the drama or addicted to the drama, it keeps you free from that. So one of my rules, and this is family, me, whatever, it's a practice that when you're driving along and you see someone across on the side of the road changing a tire, you can either look and gawk, right? And that
rubberneck,
right? Or you could do what I do, where if I'm not willing to get out of my car and help, keep your eyes on the freaking center of the road, right? And that keeps me from, like, I want to watch and I want to look, right? Because everybody does, but I'm going to deprive myself of looking, because then I'm in that same boat of I'm interested in the drama. So I'm going to dig up some drama, and I like freaking drama.
Yeah. Drama is no bueno.
Don't like it.
But some people, though, like they have to have it to survive. Like, there's just all they know. And I've seen it in relationships with, people that get in relationships. And I'm just like, wow, like, like you're in this. And so either we're going to get off the crazy train together, or you guys are going to keep doing the same cycle over and over and over again until you die.
Can I give you a theory? So, we've spent a lot of time with those in addiction recovery. And one of my theories is that part of the addiction cycle on drama and crisis is the risk of something. Like, it's connected to like a gambling addiction as it is, like chemical dependencies and whatever. Because like when you're riding that train, it could go bad or it could go good. And it's like, ooh, which is it going to be? And I watch people go down that road knowing that it'll probably go in the direction. And no matter what happens, they get their chemical release. They can't lose in that pursuit.
Interesting. How much do you think the people that live in a constant state of crisis, from fire to fire to fire, their adrenaline's always pumping because they always have a problem? How much of that is what you look for, you will find, and how much of that is their life just sucks?
It's if you look for it, you'll find it. That it because there's enough of it all around us that if we did the whole blue car thing, we'd get blue cars till it's nobody's business. And I also have another theory on this too. So being in the computer industry, I believe that the human body, have you ever watched a person that's in crisis and what physically happens to them over a number of years? They break down. Like
Yeah, yeah.
they look older than they are. And you call it
Well,
stresses.
it's like the president, right? Those before and after pictures of the
Yes.
president's a great example of that.
Yeah. And so like I try when I do my nutritional stuff to not create inflammation, and I try to save my cellular cycles from
Mhm.
happening too often, because you just kind of use yourself up when you expose your body to that much stress. And it's okay. So I explained it at my morning meetings, and this might be on a bumper sticker if I can remember the verbiage. But you know, most of us are looking for like the shortcut,
Yeah.
right? We're looking to make things easier, but easy doesn't create strength,
Right.
right? And so, but going beyond that, where if you create so much tension that you create injury, that also doesn't create strength. So it's the balance in between those two. If you make it too easy, you don't build muscle, but you make it too hard and you use yourself up. And we do one of those two things. Most of us do.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, to the blue car thing, right? So the people that live in a constant state of problem, 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 chaos, chaos, chaos. It's interesting because I've been on teams, both as a youth pastor and now as a lead pastor. I have people on my teams that we're all looking at the same issue, right? A money issue, or hey, something broke in the building, or we got a personnel issue, or we got whatever. And three people will look at the same thing, and the person who's always having the problem sees a problem. The person who's always, looking at the nuance and the detail finds that, and the person who's looking for, the positive and the solution finds that. And I find it to be true 100% of the time. I've never met the person who's always having the chaos, always having the problem, turn around and be like, I got the solution. Never happens.
Right.
It's always the person that's looking for a solution. Sometimes I'll be like, I got 5 solutions. We're going to do this and we're going to do this. We could try this. We could try that. And then some people are like, well, that's a dumb idea. I'm like, it is, but I don't hear you spouting anything.
Right.
You're just saying the problem's bad. We all know it's bad. So let's fix it.
Yeah. And so even going back a couple of topics ago, where, each of us have, good and bad in us, and the one that wins is the one that you feed. So
Yeah.
if it's like, if you're a negative person and you feed the negative, then your all of your observations and all your neurological responses gravitate towards the thing that you feed the most and what you practice the most.
Yep. The legs feed the wolf.
The legs feed the wolf.
Yeah. That's from the movie Miracle. With the U.S. hockey team beat
Okay.
the Soviets. That's one of the sayings of the coach, Coach Herb Brooks. But anyway, when you experience crisis, I think for the average person sitting there, they think of the death of a loved one. They think of some sort of horrible health diagnosis, or losing a house, or going back. Those are the kind of categories I think of large scale crises. Then you can get into smaller ones. But let's talk about the big ones. Like, my parents went through a bankruptcy and a foreclosure, and they lost our house. Now I was 7, so I know these things after the fact. But at the time, I remember we had to move in with my grandparents. People from church were bringing us dinners. It was a weird kind of time. I remember cutting out food stamps with my mom, like on the bathtub. We'd be taking a bath, and she'd be cutting out food stamps next to the tub or whatever. Back when you used to get the booklets and stuff. They went through a hard season, and I think the only thing that got them through that season were the people they had around them. There was no moment where my dad was like, oh, I'm just going to launch a company, or I'm going to whatever. He went to work and did the best he could. My mom, I think, ended up in that season getting a job, and she did the best she could to keep us afloat. Thank God for my grandparents and their house, and we were able to, have a roof over our heads. But there was some embarrassment, I'm sure, for my dad, and some shame, and, he had to wrestle through those things as a man. But I really, looking back at that season and knowing what I know now, even though I was 7 and I had to change schools and all that, like, if it wasn't for a community like the church, if it wasn't for family, if it wasn't for good friends that would come and take me and my brothers off my parents' hands so that they could both go to work, or go into grandma's house, or going wherever, just to be normal, I don't think you make it through those seasons. In the big crises, how important is support system?
This is my worst. This is Joe's worst. I do not know how to ask for help. Okay. I don't. And if I went through a crisis, I would be a it's my responsibility. I probably created this. I'm not going to bring anybody else into my nightmare. It's not fair to them, right? And I would basically insulate everybody from being able to ever help me, because you would never, ever, ever know it. So you tell me how it's fair to ask other people to help you in your crisis, especially if you create it.
Well, fair's the wrong question, I think. Fair might be the question Joe is asking Joe, but ultimately, people go through crisis all the time. I mean, you talked about the addiction recovery guys that we work with, and honestly, none of them, all of them. Hey, can you get me a job? Can you find me a place? Like,
no, bashful.
Well, and here's the whole thing, and I don't mean any disrespect in this way, but when you hit rock bottom, like, beggars can't be choosers in that sense, and so they got nothing left. Like, the shame's gone, all that sort of stuff. Like, I just need help, and I think for a lot of folks, they don't want to ask for help because it's almost like, I should be able to figure this out. And while that's true to some extent, and it sounds noble, there's this scripture, Joe.
It's back.
in Genesis, when God makes Adam, he makes the first man, and the only thing in all creation he says isn't good. It's not good for man to be alone. Solomon tells us in Ecclesiastes that two are better than one. They get a better return for their labor. They can keep each other warm. They can look out for each other. And so the idea of community is built into the fabric of creation. And so when we go isolation in our issues, we actually prolong the crisis, and we can actually cause more damage. Now, sure, you may find a solution, and maybe you'll really develop some character in that spot. There's certainly people and stories we could point to with that. But I would say 9 times out of 10, when somebody's going through a crisis, my number one response is you need people. You need people around you. You need good people around you. Don't put bad people, because you're in a crisis. Bad people step on your head while you're drowning. Like,
right.
You want the people that, hey, you swam through that before. Can you show me teach me the backstrokes of how to get through this financial crisis or whatever it is? That people, that resource is so important. Not just, you talked about outsourcing your crises. You don't do that without a community and without people and without people you trust. Like, if I ran into a financial crisis, the IRS came and knocked on my door and said, "Oh, you owe $20,000 in back taxes." I'm making 2 or 3 phone calls, and they're, not. I love my mom. My mom's a CFO at a law firm. I might get some advice there, but I'm probably calling Joe Danier and saying, "Hey, you know how this stuff works. Can you put me in touch with an accountant? Can you put me, what do I do? I don't know what to do." If, if I'm having a ministry crisis, I'm probably picking up the phone and calling Bishop and saying, "Hey, you did this for 43 years. You did really well. Help me." And so that those community things are so important, because whether it's a church community, a secular community, like, having the resources. One of the jokes that we have on our board, when we have a problem, 9 times out of 10, someone will go, "You know what? I got a guy. He's a plumber. He does da 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 da. I'll call him, see if he can come tell us, what we're getting into," or whatever the issue is. And so when you have that community resource, the wealthiest person in the room is not the person with the most money, but with the most relationships every time.
Yeah. And when we give when we find someone and give them money in their in their crisis moment, it's really rewarding on our
Absolutely.
side. But when I experienced that, I think, thank God, like, I knew about that. I would never be able to find me in that other direction. So I always think, like, how would I find someone who's too afraid or too embarrassed or doesn't know how to do it, that really could need some help, but will not mention it to anybody. And I don't have that answer yet.
Well, I mean, the Bible says you don't have because you don't ask. Like, there's some of those instances where people go through life and they're like, "Well, God's forgotten me." I'm like, "Well, you just didn't open your mouth." When I do membership class at the church, the number one thing I tell people is, I don't read minds. So, like, if you're having surgery and you want help, or you want a phone call, or you're feeling lonely, like, the church office number is right there. Call. We'll gladly call back and pray with you. We'll do whatever. But I don't know that you're going through a crisis.
This feels like the blue car example, and I hate when you feed back my own advice to me. Damn it.
Hey, just saying. But it's true. So, in that instance, with church, people all the time, like, "Well, Pastor, how come you didn't call me?" I'm like, "Well, I didn't know." And they're like, "Well, I posted on Facebook." And I know this is going to sound kind of cocky, but I'm like, I have 4,500 friends on Facebook. I don't see your Facebook,
Right.
and I'm not on there scrolling. I post a lot, but I'm not just sitting there endlessly scrolling through everybody's Facebook, and talk about hundreds of people in your care and all that sort of stuff. It's like, so if you have surgery this week, like, do us a favor, call the office. And I promise you, Pastor Joanne, myself, Pastor Mike, someone will call you and pray with you. Pre-COVID, we used to show up. I would show up at 5:30 in the morning and pray with somebody before they went into surgery. But if they didn't call, like, I have a tough enough time keeping my own schedule.
Right.
Like, I don't know that you're going in for hernia surgery at 5:30 in the morning at Southwoods unless you call and tell me. So, but that goes back to the crisis standpoint. Sometimes you can't plan crises. Sometimes they happen. A lot of times they just happen. But if you don't reach out in that moment, how are people supposed to surround? How are people supposed to be there? We've had a number of families, have COVID recently, and thank God everybody is healthy now, and it's pulled through from my understanding. I think we had one family just recently, diagnosed, but everybody seems to be pretty mild with it and going through. Some had it harsher than others. But when I'm aware, and I'm texting that family as often as I think of it, hey, how you feeling today? Praying for you. Is there anything that you need? Can church do anything? But if I'm not aware, like, don't get mad at me. I didn't know I didn't know you were sick. I didn't know you were at home. And so, even able to have some phone calls and be able to connect with them. And what's neat is when other people in the church are aware. One family recently just got through COVID. We got to hang out with them this weekend, and they mentioned that a couple of families, your family being one of them, sent them some food while they were sick. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. But you would have never known unless they reached out or said, hey, we're sick. And you guys went, oh, you know what? Let's meet a need. It's tough to meet a need that you don't know exists.
Yeah. And I'm gonna take note of this, and I'm gonna picture you in this moment right now, because I know that Doug would not only be you wouldn't feel inconvenienced if I picked up the phone
Not
right now.
at all.
But in my head, guess what I would picture you
Sure.
as? Like, you're in your robe, and the last
Yeah.
thing in the world you need to do is one more thing, like look out for me and whatever. I got to get over that shit, because it is more than once it's happened, and more than one example that I've come up that I can't be that way, but I am that way right now. So I
Yeah.
got to change that.
And it's interesting. I was told by a mentor early on that generosity has to flow both ways for you to be generous. The way that you can receive help and receive aid says as much about your generosity as the way you can give it. And I know you're a big giver on the front end, but on the back end, you got to explore Joe a little bit
For
to figure out
sure.
why that's a difficult thing to receive. I had a tough time early on as pastor. Everybody's looking like they kind of venerate the position, and I get it to some extent. The Bible says those who preach and teach are worthy of double honor, and there's certain passages that people go to, but oftentimes it can get a little celebrity-ish. It's a little weird sometimes, and that's why I say as often as I do, guys, I put my pants on one leg at a time. Like, just because I have the microphone, like I'm a guy just like you, I repeat that ad nauseum from the stage, because people tend to put you on a pedestal in spiritual leadership for whatever reason. And I don't know if that's built in, if that's God's design, or if that's just human nature. But early on, people would come and offer me, hey, we want to take you guys to dinner. I'm like, oh, you don't have to do that. I can buy my own dinner. And I would feel weird, but everybody wanted to come around and, hey, we know that you can make more money doing other things, but so we want to bless you, and we want to help your family, and we understand. And even now, like, people are very kind. We had somebody, hey, we know you're taking all the kids to the fair, and we just want to bless you and your family. Here's a couple $100 to take the kids to the fair. And I'm like, I don't ask for that. But 10 years ago, I'd have been like, no, take that. I wouldn't have spent it. I would have tried to give it back to them in some way. And I had a mentor early on say, if you can't receive that from them, you don't really understand how blessing works. And I was like, you think giving it away is the way? Yes. And it feels more blessed to give than to receive, but receiving is just as important. If you don't understand the concept of receiving, you really don't get the fullness of what giving means, because there's something that happens when you allow yourself to be given to. There's something that on the inside that, in the same way when you give away, it feels good, to really allow yourself fully, not like, oh, shucks, I can't believe they did that. I could have gotten this for myself, but I so appreciate the gift and really value it. I mean, for instance, I have not paid for a haircut in 15 years, maybe. So when we were youth pastors, we had 3 students that came through our youth ministry. Mom was a hairdresser. She would come to the house, bring all her stuff, cut my hair. Sometimes I would go to the salon. And since being here between Karen and Jess and a few others, I very rarely, maybe half a dozen times, I've had to pay for one. Now I know you haven't had to pay for a haircut in a long time,
Yeah.
but those sort of things, that when I'll never forget. I went and got a haircut when I first moved here, and I was like, I need a haircut. It had been like 3 or 4 weeks. I was like, I got to go find a place to get a haircut. So I went and got a haircut. I show up at church on Sunday, and I think I just met Karen once, and Karen comes up and she goes, "Oh, who cut your hair?" Da, da, da. And I'm like, I went to like, Joe's shop like around the corner. Like I don't know. I picked one. I Googled it, had good reviews, and I showed up. And she goes, "Oh no, you come see me from now on." And I was like, okay. And so I went and showed up, and I didn't know that it was going to be taken care of, but I went and I was prepared to pay. And it's a salon, not a barber shop. But then she took care of me, my wife, my kids, and the first few times we were like, "Oh, here," and she's like, "No, I just want to bless you guys." And that's so weird sometimes, right?
Oh
You're sitting over there looking at
sure.
me like it's the strangest thing. But I've learned that as I receive that, God brings other ways for me then to release those gifts. So as those seeds get planted in me, it makes me want to be more generous on the front side. The more I receive, the more I'm like, how do I bless? Because I know how good it makes me feel. It kind of primes that pump, if that makes sense.
How the heck did we get on this topic?
I don't know.
Uncomfortable here. This feels like an intervention. Let's talk about something else.
We started on crises.
Yes.
And a great way to get out of crises is to receive help from others, Joe. It is. When we're weak, we have to let others come in and be strong for us.
I feel like this show is a message for me, honestly.
That was good. Well, I think regardless of how our viewers are doing, if you're going through a crisis, let somebody know. You can even message the show. Joe and I'll chat with you. We'd love to help you through whatever it is, because there's a solution to your issue, and you don't have to go on the roller coaster ride of the crises. You can. There is help out there for you. It's one of the reasons we do the shows. We want to give people advice in advance. We want to give people advice on the back end so that we can help them take the next step for themselves. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you on Thursday, possibly with a special guest.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. If you like our programming, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page, or subscribe to your favorite podcast platform like iTunes or Spotify. This is original Youngstown content, and we would appreciate you sharing the videos and the word about us. Thank you.